All right, let's dive into a story that honestly has it all. We're talking a self-proclaimed crypto king, a massive $500 million global scam, and, well, a really brutal, shocking end. We're about to pull back the curtain on how a kingdom built entirely on digital illusions came crashing down in, seriously, the most violent way you can imagine. Okay, just look at this. This is the whole story in one picture, right? On one side, you've got the persona he sold to the world, Roman Novak, the crypto genius. We're talking private jets, supercars, the absolute peak of success. And then on the other side, you see the horrifying reality of where it all ended up. So the big question is, how does a guy go from a penthouse in Dubai to a shallow grave in the desert? Yeah, let's get into it. So where did this all start? Well, it all began with an illusion. See, Roman and his wife, Anna, they were smart. They knew that in the crazy, high-stakes world of crypto, perception isn't just a big deal, it is everything. So what did they do? They carefully, meticulously built this perfect online image, a total digital facade that was basically designed from the ground up to lure people in. I mean, they curated their life like it was a Hollywood movie. Their social media, it was a masterpiece of deception. It painted this perfect picture of a young, brilliant Russian couple just living the absolute dream in Dubai. You saw the private jets, you saw the supercars, and the story was that all of it, every last bit, was funded by their incredible genius in the crypto markets. Every single post was another brick they carefully placed in this massive wall of lies they were building. But here's the real genius move, the masterstroke. It wasn't just about flashing the cash. Nope. It was about claiming he was close to power. Novak went around telling everyone he was a major insider at Telegram, a personal friend of the founder. And that created this instant vibe of legitimacy that was so hard to question. I mean, if you believe that, you thought you were getting access to some secret, inside track. And of course, everybody wanted a piece of that. But, of course, behind that whole glamorous curtain was nothing more than a criminal enterprise. And listen, this was not Roman Novak's first rodeo, not by a long shot. The guy had a history of fraud. He was just using this new, super polished persona to pull off what would be his biggest scam ever. So how did the whole thing work? It was a classic Ponzi scheme. For anyone who's not totally sure what that is, just think of it like a house of cards. It looks totally solid and stable, but only as long as new money from new investors keeps flowing in at the bottom. The second that stops, the whole thing is designed to completely collapse. And guess who gets burned? The last people who put their money in. And this is exactly how he pulled it off with his platform, which was called Fintopio. The steps were brutally simple, but man, were they effective. First, he'd use that fake Telegram reputation to get people hooked. Then, he'd pay out just enough in fake profits to early investors to get them excited and create a ton of buzz. And then, once he'd raked in a massive fortune, he just turned off the money tap. Boom. June 2025, withdrawals disabled. Game over. And the sheer scale of this, it's just staggering. Let that number sink in for a second. We're talking about $500 million. This wasn't some small-time grift. This was a huge international operation that completely wiped out the life savings of thousands and thousands of people. And get this, his victims weren't just, regular people. Oh, no. He conned some seriously powerful figures all over the world. We're talking a member of the Russian parliament, high-ranking security officials in Ukraine, powerful businessmen from China and the Middle East. I mean, the list goes on. The point is, these are not the kind of people you can just steal from and expect to walk away. He was making some very, very powerful enemies. And that, of course, brings us to the final fatal act. The walls were closing in. Angry investors were demanding their money back. And Novak agreed to what he probably thought was just another business meeting to smooth things over. But in reality, he was walking straight into a trap that he was never, ever going to escape. So, October 2nd, that's the day it all came crashing down. Roman and Anna get driven out to this remote, secluded villa for what they've been told is a business meeting. But there was no deal happening. There was no negotiation. It was a straight-up abduction. Their captors wanted one thing and one thing only: the password to that massive crypto fortune. And after hours of being tortured, Novak finally broke. He gave it to them. But this is where the story takes a turn that nobody saw coming. The kidnappers must have thought they'd hit the jackpot, right? They probably believed they were just a few clicks away from becoming multimillionaires. Well, they were dead wrong. I mean, just let that sink in. The whole plan, the kidnapping, the torture, all the immense risk they took, It was all for nothing. That $500 million fortune they were after, it was gone. The crypto king, as it turns out, was completely broke. And you can just imagine what happened next. That discovery sent the kidnappers into an absolute violent rage. All that greed just instantly turned into pure blind fury. They realized they'd been played by the ultimate con man. And right there in that villa, all that frustration just exploded into a horrific, brutal double murder. They killed both Roman and Anna. So who were these guys? Who could pull something like this off? Well, this wasn't some amateur hour job, that's for sure. This crew was professional, and they were led by a mastermind who, and you can't make this up, knew exactly how murder investigations work from the inside. Yeah, take a look at this crew. The mastermind, this guy Konstantin Shakhnov, was a former cop. His job? Investigating murders. His accomplices were a couple of hardened ex-military guys. So on paper, they absolutely had the skills to pull this off and get away with it. But their plan, no matter how detailed it was, had a fatal flaw. And it always comes down to the small stuff, doesn't it? Their mistakes were so simple, but they were absolutely fatal to their plan. They left a t-shirt at the crime scene. They got caught on CCTV footage at a border crossing. They left traces of DNA behind. It just goes to show no matter how clever you think you are, you almost always leave something behind. And that's all it took for the authorities in the UAE and Russia to start putting the pieces together. But here's the thing. Even with the killers caught and arrested, this story is far from over. Because the very nature of who Roman Novak was, a guy who lived his entire life as one giant deception, has left some huge, lingering questions that are just hanging in the air. So what really happened that night? Is it the most obvious answer? Was this just a kidnapping by some furious victims that spiraled completely out of control the second they found out the money was gone? It's the simplest explanation, but as we've seen, with this story, nothing is ever simple. Or was there something way more sinister going on? You have to remember, the crypto underworld has its own, let's call it a justice system. When you steal $500 million from some really powerful people, maybe this wasn't a botched kidnapping at all. Maybe it was a calculated professional hit, a message sent loud and clear to anyone else who even thinks about crossing them. And then there's the final theory, the one that, if it's true, would be his ultimate masterpiece. What if the master con artist managed to pull off one last incredible trick? What if Roman Novak actually faked his own death to escape everything and everyone? And that's not just some crazy idea I'm throwing out there. That's a direct quote from one of the businessmen that Novak scammed, and this guy is absolutely convinced it was all a setup. So that's the real question we're left with, isn't it? Was Roman Novak the victim of a truly brutal murder, or was he the architect of the greatest vanishing act of all time? In a life that was built on nothing but lies, the final truth, well, it might be something we never ever find out.